Welcome to the Medisun Podcast. Today we have a very special guest, Dr. Jack Kruse. He is a recently retired neurosurgeon and, one of the pillars and kind of one of the fathers of quantum biology, a huge influence on myself, and I know a lot of other people. So, Dr. Jack, thank you so much for coming on.
No problem. Anytime.
So, I've listened to a ton of your podcasts and read a lot of your work. I wanted to start back in time a little bit in your earlier days as a surgeon. Um, what was your experience dealing with the human body, specifically like looking at a human brain? And when did you kind of realize that the human body was capable of some truly amazing things?
I realized the human body was capable of amazing things before I was a doctor, probably when I was 4 years old. Um, I was very inquisitive as a kid, and I used to ask, my family, teachers, all different kinds of questions that they couldn't answer. So, of course, they always sent me to the library. And, that was the time when the library actually had a Dewey Decimal System and all that jazz. And when I was young, my fourth grade teacher, Miss Shinazi, actually had to get me access to the adult library because the stuff that I was asking was pretty high level, even then.
Hmm.
And this is the times way before the internet. We're talking 60 years ago. And I basically did my homework. I kept reading. When I was a little kid, I actually used to make my father go to the butcher shop and get organs for me to dissect. I was doing this when I was 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. So I kind of knew um, what I was going to do with my life. And then when you become a doctor, it's kind of an interesting thing. You learn the basics in medical school, and I mean the real basics. Most medical students don't have the time to go into deeper things because you're struggling to learn at the pace that medical school's teaching you because you really have to learn a lot in 2 years because that's where you're learning a lot of the basic science. And if you come into medical school, say you weren't a biology major, you probably were behind the scenes because a lot of people don't realize when people go to medical school, not everybody is a biology major. Most people are, but not everybody is. So, like, if you are majoring in something else and you decide you want to be a doctor, you really had to, drink from a fire hose to catch up. And that kept people like staying in the lane that medical school wanted you to stay in. And ultimately, it was in medical school that I figured out that big pharma was creating our curriculums. Because where I went to med school the first 2 years, we used to have these curriculums in loose leaf books, and they were printed out, kind of like notes that the professor would give us. And you could see like the references and things, they were all tied to a lot of marketing stuff for big pharma. And I thought that was really bizarre that they didn't always reference, medical textbooks. Now we did have textbooks. I still have my medical textbooks. When I went to medical school, they're sitting in El Salvador on my rack. And I use them quite a bit. But even within the textbooks, you could see that there was big missing pieces. The number one missing piece, I think the first 2 years I went to medical school that I realized before I was really taught was all the different parts of the brain that were involved with circadian biology. Back when I went through, we really didn't know shit. I mean, it was like stunning how much we didn't know. And then I thought the other class, which was the last class of my second year, that was a big black hole for not only me but also for the most of the medical students because the curriculum was so shitty, was hormones. Like, it was the endocrine hormone panel. And I didn't realize until much later that most of the stuff in there was linked to the circadian biology stuff because it turns out circadian biology was the thing that controlled all the hormones. And that was one of the big missing pieces that were in both of those sections. The circadian biology stuff was linked into my central nervous system module, which was, I think, close to the beginning of my second year. Um, but the hormone one being at the end of the year, it also made me think, why in the hell wouldn't you put these two things together when they seem to be so close together? But it was kind of, I don't want to say it was nefarious, but I do believe there was some nefariousness to it, that they didn't want these two classes together, because you actually may have put two and two together and said, there's something to this. And I'd love to tell you that even reading the textbooks, um, that it was easy to put these things together, but it wasn't. And that I do have a fundamental belief that many of the textbooks that I had were actually created by PhD researchers who were getting huge grants from big pharma. And I realized that when I was in medical school, and I thought to myself, this is the most fucked up thing ever, because you even as a young man, I knew incentives dictated outcomes, but I thought to myself, why is the system, built, this way? But never putting two and two together, that's actually part of the control arm, or what I like to call the Cantillon effect of big pharma, like how they keep control of the centralized system. But ultimately, the DNA of this control mechanism really starts, I would say, in the medical school curriculum. That's when you really can see it. I've been told by kids that are going to medical school now that the programming starts now in high school and college. In other words, AP classes, things like that. And I would imagine it would change, just because now most of those kids are not using textbooks and books. They're using, programs and computers. And with programs and computers now with AI, it's very easy to give what I'd like to say information that gives you basic information, but gives you a lot of half truths. And the half truths always let the controlling mechanism have the power, over what you believe. Because really, when you learn, this is just like a USB drive put in your head, and whatever they're teaching you, and that's what you get tested on, that's what you have to know. And that's, I think, the frustrating thing that's at the basis of your question. Like, why don't medical students and MDs really question what they're believing? Pretty much is because you're drinking from a fucking fire hose, for those 2 years. And the smartest in the class probably have the most time. I had probably the most time. And I was actively questioning that stuff the first 2 years. When I got into the third and fourth year, it was actually pretty easy um, to really begin to question more, because when they put you in front of experienced doctors, who are in the hospital, you can ask some really interesting questions, because, you go from PhDs that are treating you, then you have MDs, and sometimes you get lucky and you have an MD PhD. And it turns out some of those people were incredibly important to me. And I'm going to tell you about one. I've talked about him in one other podcast, because nobody ever asked me about this stuff. And it really is interesting. The first class that I ever took in medical school was my biochemistry. And biochemistry, where I went to school, was noted as the number one class in the first year that most people would get fucking hammered on. Okay. Because you had to learn it all, I think, in 8 weeks. And can you imagine just learning biochemistry in 8 weeks and mastering it? So the grades came out, and it had to be curved up because the class did horrible. I mean, they really did bad. And I did really good on the test. I got like a 96 on this test. I was the curve breaker. And the thing that stuck out to me in this class, the first guy came in and gave us a lecture about cholesterol and cholesterol biology. And his name is Peter Setlow. I will never forget this guy, because he set the fire in me. He got in front of the class. He was from Boston. He had a heavy accent. And he goes, I have to give you a disclosure. I have to teach this stuff to you. I don't believe any of it, but I have to teach it to you. And when he said that to me, I'm like, oh, I like this fucking guy. I mean, I'm sitting in the back of the class, And when he went through the whole thing, I went down to him and I said, can I ask you what are the reasons why you don't believe this and this and that? He says, look, I can't talk to you about this here because the department chairman's here and they already didn't want me to tell you what I told you. He goes, come and see me in my office and we can sit down and have a coffee and talk. So you know that I hightailed my ass down there and learned about, what was the real story about cholesterol. And he's the one that told me if you look in the patents of the cholesterol drugs, you'll see what Merck was really up to. And that was like my first fuck you moment. If I would tell you, for people who want to know why Jack has become a real pain in the ass, is I think Peter Setlow lit that fuse in me when I was a really young guy. I was young. And when I found out the level of what these guys went to, because he even talked to me about the new codes that were coming in, because he had trained at Harvard. And he said, Harvard is the one that started all this bullshit. So like I already had the crumbs for the corrupt centralized institutions and how the money trail, went back to big pharma. And that is how my career in medical school began. It was like, it was a different experience than most of my class, because most of my class didn't focus in on that issue. They were just really concerned about learning the biochemistry. And for me, I had taken AP biochemistry when I was, I think I was in junior high school and high school, and I had smoked it. For me, this was like a review course, but it was a high level review course. And some of the stuff that was not in it, like what Setlow was teaching me, he then gave me books that said, look, if you really want to learn, the stuff that's really important, he's the one that talked to me about some of the older biochemists who also didn't believe this shit. Like he told me about the complications between Krebs and Albert St. Georgi. Like these were like really cool things to figure out. And he said, if you really want to know the truth about science, he goes, you really need to know the history of science and how the science was done. He says, because if you know that, he goes, then you can find out, what was accepted by the paradigm and is going to be taught in medical school. He says, but you have to remember something. You're going to be a clinician taking care of people. And if something that you were taught is contrary to what reality is, he goes, you still have a duty. You got to take that oath that you still need to do that homework, because you're going to have to learn some of this stuff after you come out of your clinical rotations when you're in residency. And he said, remember, residency is a totally different, ball game, because that's when you're doing clinical medicine. You're applying the lessons that we're teaching you, in the first 2, 3, 4 years. And he goes, and you have to be the decision maker. He said, the better you prepare, he goes, the better you'll be. And it was like the best advice that I ever got. I really highlight this guy because without him, I don't think my trajectory and why I can be such an acerbic pain in the ass to people can be overstated. I believe it started that day with that discussion in his lab when we sat down and had coffee to chat about cholesterol biology.
And it makes total sense. What you've spoken about with like the Manhattan Project. Like if you got to keep these people separated so they can't put two and two together.
Yeah,
Now,
well, I didn't know, and I'll be very frank with you, I didn't know about that information at this time.
mhm.
And you are absolutely correct that what Big Pharma was doing was what uh, Manhattan Project, what DARPA learned afterwards, that this is the best way to keep the casino game going in science, is just silo scientists. And, I'll even give credit where I don't like to give credit to Huberman, because Huberman actually realized in the podcast that we did that that was the case. And he said, you're right, that this is a huge problem in science. So it's kind of like he's part of the machine. He's part of the casino, but he's not willing to really speak out and change it. And if you remember in that podcast, what I said to him, it's very germane to the question you just asked me. I said, look, bottom line is you're going to train a lot of these medical students. So I was kind of um, channeling Peter Setlow to see if Huberman would want to become a guy like Setlow to teach them the truth. And, and when he talked about his buddy Eddie Chang and neurosurgery out there, he said 50% of the things were bullshit that are in our book. And I countered that. I said, no, I think it's fucking 99%. I think it's all bullshit. And that that opinion never really probably comes if I don't have that discussion with Setlow. Why? Because I realized from what Setlow taught me about cholesterol, that cholesterol, he's the first person that ever told me that cholesterol had an absorption and emission spectra. And he says the reason for that is because it changes during seasons. He says that's why mammals change their coats. He says you will never find this in our curriculum. And I was just stunned when I heard that. And then I started to think, okay, well, he taught me that in cholesterol. Then I realized the whole first 2 years of fucking medical school, nobody ever taught me about any other absorption and emission spectra. And this was such a powerful thing that, I don't know, this was about 10 or 15 years ago. I got really pissed off at Ray Pete. And I went to see Ray Pete, and I gave him the information that you and I are talking about right now. And he just looked at me with eyes glazed and had no answer for any of this stuff. I said, dude, you're a biochemist. At the time, I think he was like 70 years old, maybe even older. I said, this doesn't bother you that you're out here still spilling the party line, and it's a fucking half truth. I mean, here's the papers. I threw papers and papers and papers in front of him. And I said, you can't keep telling people to fucking eat carrots and orange juice with this information. You know that this is factually incorrect. He says, yeah, but that's what everybody believes, and that's what I'm going to stick with. And when I heard that, I said to him, I said, well, you need to understand that I'm that dude that I have a duty to go out and tell people you're fucking full of shit. And Peter Setlow is the one that put that in me. He says, look, he goes, I stood in front of your class and I said what I said. He goes, I had to get that statement approved by my director. And don't you think the head of biochemistry was standing there, the first lecture he gave us, to make sure he didn't say anything else. And I have to tell you that was the greatest lesson I think I learned in medical school. If you want to know the truth, and it's something that I often reflect on, I very rarely talk about, because nobody really wants to go into these deep weeds, about how this happens and how we get off the beaten path. But that's how, science was stolen. And it really is going to come down to the PhDs that teach medical students to decide what Setlow did. Like, I thought Huberman would be one of those guys. He wasn't. I look at Alexis Cowan. She's one of the ones that, she's been pretty amazed by the light side of the story. The kid that's ER doctor from Australia, Max Gulhane. I had a discussion with him, I don't know, 2-3 years ago. We did 3 podcasts together. And, at the time he was a food guru. And I said, look, Max, I really don't want to talk to you. Talking to food gurus is like talking to this fucking wall over here. I'm sick and tired of really trying to tell you how fucking wrong you are. Because you can't tell somebody how wrong they are. They have to actually do the due diligence themselves and read it. And so as we talked over those 3 hours, to his credit, he went and read and said, you know what, there's a lot to this, and Alexis did the same thing. And Alexis told me that she thought that the podcast that I did with Huberman kind of was a game changer. Why? Because she, as the PhD, realized what I was trying to do to Huberman, like get him motivated to teach Stanford medical students the truth instead of, what the party line was from Big Pharma. But if you know anything, Stanford basically is the West Coast division of DARPA, where Harvard is the East Coast division of DARPA. Setlow came from Harvard. Huberman came from Stanford. And you can see Setlow was, I think, a champion for the medical students. I don't think Huberman was for, some people may disagree. They may say, well, at least he's teaching people about light. But the stuff that he's teaching people about light is not going to change we, the people, health out
Hmm.
there. Why? Because they're still spewing bullshit. So ultimately, I think the game changer now is podcasts. When you come and do podcasts and you actually share this kind of story, and the lay public understands, okay, I can't really be mad at doctors because if they're taught bullshit and they don't have time to learn the truth, like what we're going to do. Really, the only time a doctor has time to learn the truth is after they're finished with their residency. Do they go back and read? And then what do? They have kids, they have get married. They're actually trying to pay off fucking debt. I didn't have big debt when I came out, but a doctor right now in the United States, they're looking at $400,000 to $600,000 a year. So it's like fucking paying off a house. And then when you realize you're paying off a house note by spewing propaganda, it gets fucking infuriating.
Hmm.
And you do get really mad. And then you got people, 40 to 60 people a day coming in asking your opinion about science that that's cooked. So it's a really fucked up situation. And some people just keep their nose in the sand and they said, look, I'm just going to, churn out the party line and that's it. And I understand the mindset.
Hmm.
I don't think it's right. I think all doctors have a duty to want to know the truth and you should dig deeper. But I understand that not all of us are wired, that way. And I think you, the public, with these new venues, having podcasts where you can actually talk to doctors about the philosophy of science and how it's done and why clinical medicine is cooked, then you guys get to make the choice. You can say, you know what, I'm going to pay extra for doctors who are going to teach me the truth. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to learn what my doctor refused to learn, right? I've had patients come in and say, look, we print your blogs up and walk into doctors' offices and it's kind of funny because some of the things that I get back, some of those doctors become members of my site, and then some of the doctors just bury the papers and like they're not interested.
Hmm.
And I tell the people that do it, I said, well, you just learned something about your doctor. Do you want to continue on with this guy or do you want to hire yourself a new guy? And it can be frustrating for patients.
Yeah, and I think a big piece of this, and it's kind of a mindset shift that I've had is, the system is corrupt, the system is flawed, everybody knows this. It's up to the patient to be an informed consumer. And I think that's something that the public is just missing the boat on. They think they can
Yeah.
float through life and,
And that's
it's
that's the
they'll
big
take
piece
care of
of
me.
that's the big piece of decentralized medicine. I hate to say this, but we've conditioned people in centralized medicine to rely on the experts. And you are an inactive participant. But guess what? Decentralized medicine actually requires the doctor to find the truth, but it also requires the patient to do some due diligence as well. And I will agree with you that that's probably one of the reasons why a lot of people don't like my work because they want to be spoon fed.
Hmm.
And if you know anything about me, I don't fucking spoon feed anyone. I believe that if I can be this curious to want to learn this stuff, so should you, and so should my patients. And then as soon as I find out that a patient is intensely curious about this to really reverse the disease, then I give them gobs of information and explain to them why it's a big issue. And if people don't believe that, all they need to do is probably go on my Twitter feed. I mean, it happened yesterday. Some guy named Musa, who's a peditarian, posted something about aspirin and thyroid hormones, and I fucking just took it apart. And
Hmm.
it's funny because when I went to meet Pete, this was one of the things that I actually brought up to him. And I said, you are doing so much harm to people by not telling them the truth. And the reason why I feel like doubling down on this, I mean, Pete's dead now. His work is being kept on by a bunch of influencers that are
Hmm.
online. This guy is one of those influencers. So what are we doing? We're peddling bad information when the guy who created the information is not even here to say, you know what, maybe this needs to be updated. Maybe I was wrong.
Hmm.
So I almost feel like I have to be the guardian of, the Library of Alexandria sometime. And then I feel like, okay, what's going to happen when I'm dead? Who's going to take that reign over? Who's going to be the person that's madder than fuck,
Hmm.
that goes and fix this problem? Because somebody has got to care enough to actually want to do this. And I've been pissed off about this. I'm going to tell you, it's going on 40, 45 years, but I really got pissed off about it 20 years ago when I realized just how deadly a half truth could be for the public. And I mean, we just lived through 5 years where I think I've been proven axiomatically correct with COVID. I mean, I was telling people in the beginning never to take the jab, never to wear the mask. In fact, some of the people that are, champions on Twitter now, like Brett Weinstein, I mean, there's posts that I put, with me with a mask that when I was walking through the hospital and him wearing a bandana, I said, this guy's supposed to be a fucking biologist with a PhD. I said, he's a fucking asshole.
Mm-hmm.
And, now that he's doing all the right things, I'm supposed to be nice to him. No, let me tell you how medicine works, bro. If you make the fucking mistake the first time, you don't get do-overs in medicine. Got it? I mean, if you don't believe me, look at Asim Malhotra,
Mm-hmm.
cardiologist. He thought it was a good idea to get popped, right? So his dad died because his son was a bad doctor. Now he's part of Maha. Go figure that shit out. So, and I know that what I just told you, people get pissed off. They're like, Jack, but he's now part of our team, this, that. I'm like, great. What happens if you're the fucking patient that you went to see in the beginning and you took the jab? Oh, you still feeling warm and fuzzy for Asim? I'm not. I can tell you that because guess what? As docs, we have a duty to know better. And if you tell me that it was impossible for you to know better before COVID, then you have to explain somebody like Jack Kruse
Mm-hmm.
because I fucking knew better. I told all my tribe, and most of them listened to me. And the ones that didn't are paying a steep price. Well, guess what? The diagnosis the first time is why doctors get paid. That is the truth. And if you're a good diagnostician, then you can keep your flock out of the harm's way. And I'm going to tell you, that was the message that Peter Setlow said to me in biochemistry. He said, know the history of medicine, the history of science, but also know the history of your patients. He says, if you are good at that, he goes, you can keep people from harm's way. And ultimately, that's the reason we take the Hippocratic Oath. Some of us, it means something to, some of us, it doesn't. And it's your job as the podcaster, as we the people, to decide who it is that you trust. Who's working on your behalf? Is there a hospital system between you and the patient, like you all have seen with Mary Talley Bowden? Look what happened with her. She basically just got screwed by the Texas Medical Board. Texas Medical Board sided with the hospital. So that means the hospital can make decisions, not Mary. And when you actually see this, like if I would have told you this 5 years ago, that a decision like this could be made, if this doesn't tell you how fucking cooked the system is. So every time you like your grandma or grandfather say, look, I'm going to go see the primary care doctor, you're like, I don't know if that's such a great idea. Because if they're, allowing the medical staff bylaws and the hospital administrators to make determinations of who gets medications in ICUs, like, why do you even have a doctor? Just fucking hire a nurse or AI to
Mm-hmm.
make those decisions and fuck it. Because that's where we're headed. That's what's coming.
For sure. And it's something that I've racked my brain about because I mean I paint houses for a living and I saw this coming. Like I saw it didn't make logical one-to-one sense to me. Um so I've been thinking about this a lot. Like how do I get what you're saying? Not that I understand it fully, but like it makes sense to me when I read your work and I listen to you. How big of a role do you think, like, the fact that these physicians are in a blue lit hospital, you know, their sleep schedule's all messed up, like, how big of a role do you think that's playing in their brains not being able to see the obvious?
I think it's playing a bigger role than I used to think. I used to think that it was willful negligence, but now I do believe that their ability to cognate, think, I think there's defects in their microtubules. I think there's defects in cognition. I clearly think there's defects in putting things together. And I will tell you, I have a new appreciation for this because when I went back into the hospitals the last 5 years to figure out truly what was going on with COVID, uh, I'm an old man. It actually destroyed me
Hmm.
worse going back in this time than it did when I was a young man. And I actually told my nurse, I was fucking miserable. If you want to know the truth, I was so miserable going back into ICU medicine to figure this shit out because it had huge effects on me. The interesting thing is, it didn't affect, I don't think, my cognition, but it affected my body in ways that I was really surprised at. And it's been difficult to get back to where I was when I first went in. And, people have asked me, like my kids have asked me, was this worth it?
Hmm.
And I'm like, well, it depends on the theory of relativity. If you ask me, probably not. But to find out the truth for the public, to out big pharma who they were and who they are, and to show all the pieces and parts of government that are involved in this, um, I think there's at least 50% of the audience that will listen to this. Those are the people I did it for. The other 50 or 60% that took the job that really don't want to fucking hear the truth because the truth is pretty painful now. I don't give two fucks about them.
Hmm.
And those are the people I think that have pissed me off more than anything else because here you're working on their behalf. And there a lot of those people right now, in fact, I can tell you, they're on this boat. I'm on this boat with 3,000 Australians. And these people literally all took the fucking jab. I met a lady last night who told me that she had to take another jab to get on this boat. And I'm like, you got to be fucking kidding me. She, the total of seven.
Wow.
And she's got huge problems. I mean, when I tell you, I just met her yesterday, right where I'm sitting right now. And I met another lady who I had dinner with last night. I mean, I'm supposed to be on vacation. Met a lady last night with turbo cancer that she's now asking me, what do I need to do? And it's been kind of cool because there's been a nurse on the boat who jumped in the pool and she goes, "You're Jack Kruse, aren't you?" I'm like, "Yeah." And she goes, "Can I talk to you?" And I knew that she had to know who I was because she has the best tan on the boat.
Hmm.
So it was kind of funny. But this actually makes it real. When you're on the other side of the world and you see the people that complied, I have to work for these people, even though I don't like them. I don't like them because they complied, they didn't think, they just did whatever the doctor told them. But now these people, they're injured. And there's no hope. Like to listen to the lady that had the turbo cancer, after they operate on her, they still made mistakes and they're still making mistakes. So I had to tell her, stop. This is what you need to do. And then yesterday, I'm going to tell you, I spent almost 8 hours with her.
Wow.
And I led her through the whole path of what she needs to do. This doesn't happen unless I'm on vacation, going to drop paperwork off about, Australian influencers to their government. Uh, and I just thought it was ironic to sit here and talk to her and see these people. That those were the people, and I realized this last night. Those are the people that I went back to work for. So when I think about that, was it worth, destroying my body again to do it? I guess it was because I can't have that I don't want to call it a consult because she's not really a patient. I was giving her advice
Hmm.
on a cruise ship and said, these are the things that you need to do. I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't go back in and find out the truth about what was going on.
And like a lot of these people, they need a whack on the top of the head almost. It's like you're going to keep going back to the same environment, the same people who have never once fixed you, and you're going to keep going back.
Not only that, the real shocker talking to this lady is why she did it to begin with. It was the stupidest reason ever, and she still doesn't realize it was stupid. She did it so she could see her plus 90 mother And I said, your mother's life is basically over. Her mother's still alive. I said, but here you are, 68 years old, and your life could be ended. You're never going to get the last 30 years your mother got. I said, do you realize what you did? And we had a very interesting discussion at dinner. And she's kind of made her peace with, yeah, she sacrificed herself to kind of do that so she could help her mother at the end of her life. And I have to be honest with you, me as the diagnostician, me as the I guess the time accountant, I'd never make that choice. Like
Hmm.
never, not in a million years. But remember, me as a doctor, I can't put a value judgment on a patient's how they choose to spend their time. Even when I know it's crazy, it's her decision to do what she's doing. And I realized that last night, uh, that I had to like back off on her. Like it was kind of like when I talked to her, I wanted to go after her like I would go after one of you guys on social media. And I realized I couldn't do that. Um, so I didn't do it. And the way the whole thing ended, she goes, look, she goes, I'm definitely converted. She goes, I'm not doing any of this stuff again. She goes, but you're telling me there's a pretty easy way for me to go after this. I'm like, yeah, there is. Because she was ready. I think this trip was her last trip where she was ready to give up hope. And when I told her, and I had my computer out, and Chantal was here, and she was showing her like papers on top of papers.
Hmm.
She finally said to me, she goes, how is it that I'm in the middle of the fucking ocean and a guy I don't even know knows this information, but my surgeon doesn't? And it's funny that you and I are doing this podcast today because your first question is the reason why her surgeon didn't know any of
Hmm.
this information. Like he had no idea how to treat the complication that he caused. And, this is not a surgery that I even do, but I know a lot about it. And when I told her, she was like, wow. So we'll see.
So, I mean, we'll just keep on that train. Like, what? Not necessarily like a detox from the vax, but is your
There is
is
no
your
detox from the
yes,
vax.
yes.
That is unfortunately one of the things that the wellness company doctors brought to the forefront,
Hmm.
namely McCullough. I think in the beginning it was reasonable to have his a plan of approach, but we now know through a lot of the work, of all the scientists that are on Twitter, people that are linked to both me and Kevin McKiernan, that it's redox. You have to build your
Hmm.
redox. You have to keep your immune system in tip-top shape. You have to keep the genome quiet because we know there's intercalation across the board. You get intercalation just from the jab. You get intercalation also from COVID itself.
Hmm.
And we know that the spike is persistent. We know the spike is a mitochondrial toxin. So anybody who tells you that, you can get a detox protocol, they're fucking idiots. Why? Because your immune system is constantly making the spike. So that means that you need to have a different plan.
Hmm.
And that different plan is you have to redox, not detox. And that means making sure that your natural killer cells are tip top shape, that you understand that where those cells come from, T regulated cells in your skin. Your skin needs to look like this. You need to be in the sun all the time. You took the jab and you think you can live in Massachusetts or Ontario, and like just say you took 7 of them
Hmm.
and you live in Melbourne, you're fucked. You can't stay there. You just can't. And if you do, realize what's going to happen to you. You are likely, even if you don't get the turbo cancer, you're going to get an autoimmune condition. You're going to get some other condition. And, like I said to you before, I don't mind talking about this because they're not my patients, but the lady yesterday, skinny, pale, I don't know, 60 something, lady that took 7 jabs. She's on Ozempic. When I tell you skinny, but she started this skinny. She developed type 2 diabetes from the jabs. She now cannot eat any food. Everything has to be liquid.
Wow.
And she vomits when she eats. And when she goes to the bathroom, it's mostly water. She's completely ruin the biology of her gastrointestinal system with this. And this is not a complication that is commonly talked about, on X. We talk about the kidney
Hmm.
issues, myocarditis, and the turbo cancers. But this lady's condition is totally tied to the destruction of the circadian clocks in her gut. And I was trying to explain to her that the skin clocks control the gut clock. So if you want to get control back of this, that you need to start with this. And I said, you've been on this boat for 3 months. And I mean, so look at me and look at you. Today happens to be a red light day where we're at. It's pouring rain.
Hmm.
So, but I don't know how you can stay on a boat in the latitudes that we're in and look like that and then wonder why and accept your fate. Accept, look, this is what my doctors told me to do. And she's still on Ozempic. And I'm like, you shouldn't be on that fucking drug at all.
Hmm.
Um, you can lead people to water, but you can't make them drink. And the thing is, like the people that I've interacted with on this boat, it's almost like to me, I thought I was going to have a vacation and it's not. I'm walking around here with zombies all around me.
Yeah.
They need the information that I have more than you can imagine. And it's stunning to me to actually see it. I didn't know I was walking into this, to be quite frank with
Hmm.
you.
Do you think those, I don't want to give them too much credit, but the people who orchestrated the vaccines, do you think that they had an idea that the spike was going to be a mitochondrial toxin? Like, were
Yeah,
they,
absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
because it's
That that
genius,
answer
all these
that
things
answer
are,
goes all the way back to the patents.
yeah.
Anybody who read the patents knew. I will tell you that um, when I read the patents, I warned my tribe. That information was disseminated through Ethical Skeptic. It was disseminated to Kevin. Kevin did his part in the genomics. Ethical Skeptic did all the stuff on the statistics.
Hmm.
For people to follow those three people, and then you add Mary Talley Bowden in, who started taking care of people who were sick with it afterwards. No, she was not really big time famous about avoiding it. She
Hmm.
was involved in helping people who took it and who couldn't breathe, and offering them early treatment to stay away from the jab. Uh, there was a group of us that were doing really good work. There's people like Jessica Rose out there, PhDs, warning people, do not do this. We knew what this was capable of doing. The guy that I used to have a lot of respect for, but I don't anymore, is Robert Malone.
Hmm.
Why? Because he really knew, and this will show you how dumb he was. He actually took the fucking jab so that he could travel, and he wound up being jab injured from it. And now he's still trying to convince people that the mRNA platform shouldn't be destroyed. And I understand he's one of the guys that, created it.
Hmm.
And he may think that there is some kind of benefit to science down the road. Me personally, I don't see that. I don't think that this program should be allowed to continue on at all. Not until, we have truth from the paradigm that created it, what it was really designed to do and what it's done. And, a mea culpa to say, explain the yellow card system, explain the VAERS stuff, explain John Bedoin's work, with all the states that he's pulled up about how many people have destroyed kidneys now. I mean, it's just stunning how many
Yeah.
people have been killed by this. I said on the Danny Jones podcast that I said this to Callie Means, and he had no answer for it. I said, more people have died from COVID and the COVID jab that were killed in every world war from 1914 to current. You add them all up, more people still died.
Hmm.
And I said, you and your sister still want to focus in on fucking Fruit Loops and Red Dye number 4. Now, his voice in Maha, from at least my inside baseball, he's on his way out, which is good. But Bobby seems to be getting a little bit more freedom. Like some of the things that have happened since I've been on vacation, I heard Trump fired the CDC director, which needed to happen.
Yep.
That CDC director was clearly in place because of Senator Cassidy from Louisiana, who used to be my senator before I moved most of my operations to Florida and then to El Salvador. But he is a gastroenterologist who's completely complicit. If you remember Andrew Wakefield also a gastroenterologist who had his license taken away. Cassidy has been working for Big Pharma every day he's been in the U.S. Senate. And he believes, and he does believe, that Big Pharma is good and Wakefield is bad. And anybody who looks into this story, when you see what Andy tried to do, he showed you that gut inflammation comes from these vaccines. And it is very plausible mechanism for you to develop something like asthma or autism or things like that. Doesn't mean that it's axiomatic, but there's definitely a causal link that needs to be studied. And he says no. Victoria, I get another one, a nice, thank you. So, I think when you have that much data, I think when you're a parent, yeah, please. When you're a parent, you have to decide. This is where our beginning conversation that we had in the start. This is where you, as a decentralized savage, you have to decide: do I want to keep voting for people like Bill Cassidy, who's a gastroenterologist in the state of Louisiana, that represents the Cantillon effect of Big Pharma, or do I want to listen to the history lesson that Andy Wakefield's career became? Like, you have to realize that what he went through 20 years ago, if you want to know the truth, every kid that's had autism since that time, every parent owes him a huge kudos.
Mm-hmm.
And he sacrificed himself. He died on the vine. This was like Harry Carey. His life, I had a chance to sit down with him, Mary, and Nicole. We did a live, X space on this, where it's called the Council of the Canceled, which I'm sure fine. I think it goes back to what I said to you in the beginning about Peter Setlow. Understand the history of what happened to Andy Wakefield, and then you'll understand why Bill Cassidy made sure that Susan Monrez was the amber that was around Bobby Kennedy. Why? They never want you to get to the truth. And because if you cure a customer, Big Pharma's house of cards, their Cantillon effect goes away. And it really is a stunning link that people don't understand, that centralized medicine or bad medicine always goes back to money.
Mm-hmm.
This is why guys like me, when I make the comment to savages that health and wealth are linked and that Bitcoin will fix this, I'm not lying to you. We adopt Bitcoin into centralized medicine. I'm going to tell you that the Cantillon effect of Rockefeller medicine goes bye-bye.
And it makes perfect sense. You can just separate their incentives from the outcomes. It's
right. And it goes back to Peter Setlow's. Remember, we didn't have, in the early 80s when I spoke about Setlow, we didn't have Bitcoin then. Mm-hmm. Like, in other words, there was no prescription to end, how they got control of the curriculum in medical school. But guess what? There is now. And I know a lot of people who listen to this podcast will say, how do you make the quantum leap between Bitcoin and how science is done? I would tell you, listen to a lot of the podcasts that I've done, because I made a pretty clear case. And I would say, I think Alexis Jasmine has done the same thing. Mm-hmm. Dr. Callan. The reason why, if you make people accountable to the truth and your funding is tied to that, right now the NIH budget is funded with money that's failing at 20-30% a year. So we publish shit that doesn't matter, that doesn't move the needle for patients' health. So we keep studying bullshit. And why is that good? Because it keeps Big Pharma selling us half truths. That's effectively what Ray Peat did. It's effectively what Dave Asprey is. It's effectively what the paleo guys are. It's effectively what the carnivore guys are. I hate to say this, but it's effectively what the guys selling red lights are doing. Mm-hmm. Some of them are better than others. I think the red light guys are way better than, the Aspreys of the world. But to do it right, you have to understand how we work. That's why I said I take you back to that original question you asked me, what me and Peter Sutlow talked about. It came back to sunlight. When he showed me that absorption and emission spectra, and he told me that this changes, and this is what changes mammals' coats and mammal cell membranes, I just said to myself, I wonder how many more systems this is operational in. I found out, and people who follow me have found out that it's fucking every system, which is why I said to Huber, no, it's 99%. Why? Because there's no light controls in any methodology of any NIH study out there. And when you understand, I don't think that that's really difficult for people to get.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm wrong about that, but this is such a fundamental problem that when you actually see it for what it is, and then I think about where the world went from that discussion with Peter Sutlow to now, it's fucking unbelievable how much damage centralized medicine has caused. I mean, it's worse than the Department of War. It's worse than the Pentagon.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you realize that Big Pharma was just the drug dealer in this program, who was behind it all? The Department of Defense and DARPA. So then you start to go, okay, now we're dealing with one and the same. And how do all those programs effectively work? They work because the money is failing. And that you can't wage war either on another nation or your own people without money that's failing. And that's the reason why they protect the fiat dollar. And that's the reason why, fundamentally, every time you buy Bitcoin, you are voting against the guys that are selling statins.
Mm-hmm.
You're voting against the guys that make jabs. You are voting against Novo Nordisk, who are making trillions of dollars from the sale of these GLP-1 drugs. And people look deep into my story, they'll find out about the TED Talk I did in 2010, 2011. Why it was banned? Because it was a warning shot that the leptin trials were shelved because the GLP-1 drugs were coming. So remember, before you guys ever heard of GLP-1 in 2016, I was on a stage in Nashville warning you what was coming. So I think when you get a reputation of being a prick and being a guy that knows the history in and out, and you're a detail-oriented guy, I think the tribe of people, let's say 33% out there, that is sick and tired of being lied to, those are your people.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, me as a doctor, when I come on a place like this and I see people actively dying that I can help, it's stunning. I need more help. I need more doctors to get their fucking heads out of this. Because there's a lot of people on this boat that need you.
Mm-hmm.
They need the truth. They can't have any more half lies, because if they do, it's going to steal more time from them.
And you look at something like cancer research, like it's essentially a huge money laundering scheme. Like we're pouring all this money into looking like we have a blindfold on looking for the solution to this huge issue.
I love your analogy there because I totally get it. A lot of people won't see it as a money laundering scheme. But back to your point, I said pretty controversially, I think in the COVID Revealed documentary that I did with Malone and McCullough, that if you listen to the Colombian drug cartels advice during COVID, you were safer than you were if you listened to Big Pharma. And it sounds like hyperbole until you look at it. And then when I broke down the numbers on another podcast, I said, look how many people died from opiate toxicity versus COVID. It's not even close.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out I'm factually incorrect, but they're not causally linked, obviously. But the point I try to make to you is once you understand the level of nefariousness that these fuckers went to, then I think we're at the stage right now. If the government doesn't clean up what happened in COVID, then I think we have a duty to start buying ammunition and guns and start doing what we did with King George in 1774, 5, 6, all the way through 1789. I think what we need is a George Washington type in Washington, D.C. I don't know who that's going to be. I used to think I knew, I don't think that person's even there yet. Um, but we the people, to come together about how they hurt us. And we need to start making them accountable. We need to make them afraid of us. And any way we can do it, I think the best, most peaceful way is buying Bitcoin. Why? Because every time you buy Bitcoin, you're effectively making their way of doing business extinct. So I just need every American to continue to do that. And I'm okay if you don't understand actually, the path to it. I try to lay it out a little bit to you here in a blueprint. But I think that's the best way. But do I see 25 years from now, when Bitcoin's even more developed, that I'll probably be dead at that time? But do I see a group of Bitcoiners having billions of dollars of monetary energy, hiring armies and mercenaries to fight the American Revolution 2.0? I actually think that's where we're headed, if you want to know the truth. And Bitcoiners are going to be so powerful that they will have weaponry that is on par with the military. And I think ultimately what stops the American Revolution 2.0 is, I think people in the military are going to realize we're fighting our own people, and we're fighting on behalf of these criminals that are in fucking the Pentagon. And I think that's when they may put down arms and say, fuck it, we need to take our country back. And do I think, I always tell people this, that, the history of humanity is that you have to spill blood for freedom. And, it's a sad issue. Like, I just came through part of the world here in Colombia, Venezuela, where these people are not going to get their lives back until they take back their country with force. And anybody who knows what's going on in Venezuela now, I mean, they voted. Maduro didn't like the way the vote was going. He sent the military in to close the polls, and there was no way for the people to fight back because they took their guns away. And, the people that are on this boat, which are mostly Australians, because that's where we're headed, they can't fight back either because they don't have guns. And then you see the leftists in the United States trying to take our guns away. And I hope that there's enough people, like when you hear all the school shooters and all the trannies shooting people up, you need to realize that that's an agenda to take your guns away. And you should make no holes, no bars about it, that it doesn't matter how many kids get shot at school, that patriots need to have guns to fight against the king. That is the lesson of where we come from. And that lesson is greater today than it was in 1776. The guy who is the king today, which is the Department of Defense and the Pentagon, who performed a military coup in the United States in 1963 when they killed the president, they've effectively been running the country since that day. And they gained control of the executive branch that day. They gained control of Congress with the Warren Commission. They gained partial control of the Supreme Court because, remember, Earl Warren was the Supreme Court candidate, I should say, the head Supreme Court justice. And he allowed the greatest travesty of justice to ever happen, when we started to believe the bullshit theory that Arlen Specter came up with the bullet that went through Kennedy and Conley, that there was one bullet that did this whole thing, and it had to be Lee Harvey Oswald. Dude, this story is so fucked. And now your generation, you're a young guy, you're not even fucking pissed off that this happened. Like, when Trump came out and did what he did and basically pointed the smoking gun at the CIA and the Mossad, I actually thought, as an old guy who was alive at that time, that some of you fuckers would care about it. None of you did. And I remember when Trump was a Democrat in 88, and he told John F. Kennedy Jr., who was his best friend, he goes, if I ever run, he goes, I promise you, I'm going to release who really did this. And you have to realize part of the people who did this are people who allowed Trump into New York City to sell real estate. So in other words, those were the Zionists. That's specifically the Rothschilds and Rockefellers. And to give Trump credit, I mean, he's biting the hand that fed him. Now he's still doing way too much Zionist bullshit for me,
Mm-hmm.
but I will say this: when he came out and told us the truth about who killed JFK, he gained ultimate, you know, respect for me for that. There's a lot of things about him I don't respect him for, like Operation Warp Speed. But when he released Ross Ulbricht, that's a Bitcoiner. I told you already how I feel about Bitcoin, that it's the antidote to this system. That's two big things that Trump has actually given patriots. And I'm not trying to tell you that you should like him for that reason or anything else. Remember, he is a single term president. There's
Mm-hmm.
very little he can do. But he has set up the American Revolution 2.0 because the guys that he's led into power in Washington, D.C. are the technocrats that are going to fight with the bankers. If you want to know who the two sides that are going to develop in your life, I'll be too old to give a fuck. It's going to be the technocrats of the NSA, the deep state, the Peter Thiels, the J.D. Vances,
Mm-hmm.
the Elon Musk against the banking cartel, you know, of the Rothschilds, Rockefellers that are protected by Cassidy, Senator Warren, Sherrod Brown, you know, all the people that are in the Senate Banking Committee, all the people that are in U.S. Treasury. And I don't think that people in the United States really have done the big history lesson, the diagnosis of what side is on. And when you understand that the bankers basically are the people that fund Big Pharma, they're the people that also fund the Department of Defense and the Pentagon, then you actually begin to say, okay, this really is money.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm going to understand why Jack is a big believer in money that's outside the Fed system, because that's the money. When we put our money into Bitcoin, we're effectively taking it away from them so they can harm us. And that ultimately goes back to my Hippocratic Oath, because I think that's the ultimate diagnosis that I've made. And I've been trying to get that information out
Mm-hmm.
before, you know, they turn my channel off. And I think when, you know, I have time to reflect on it, you probably caught me in a good time, because I think those people that I met yesterday that were harmed by our government, my work's not done, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, let's talk to retired neurosurgeon. I sat here when you said that. I'm like, I don't know how fucking retired I'm going to be. I'm going on a trip. But there's a lot of people. There's 3,000 people on this boat. Some of them don't even fucking know they need me.
Mm-hmm.
Sad.
And it really emphasizes the point of like you need to optimize your health in the ways that you lay out, and you need to buy Bitcoin, or else you're caught in the crossfire of these two of the technocrats and the bankers. That's pretty much where
You're
it's at.
JFK, just what
Yeah,
you said. You're between the grassy knoll and you're between, you know, the fence on the railway yard. You basically are in a shooting gallery, and
exactly.
you're getting pushed. You know, it's almost like you're a cow and you don't know what's happening. You know, and I hate to say it, that it's that matter of fact, but you're correct. And I need young people like you to care a little bit more about the history. I guess I'm having a discussion with you like Peter Setlow had with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I need you guys to really begin to understand this shit's really important. I mean, really important. And I don't know how to get that across any better than to do podcasts like this, people to ask questions, you know, you guys to sit down at the dinner table and say, look, is this guy fucking crazy or is there something to this? And then ultimately you decide, because I think you as a young guy, it's going to be your kids that are probably going to be involved in a more kinetic war. I think the war we're involved with right now, it's an electromagnetic war that's being fought between fiat and Bitcoin. And I think that's the reason why the people that are in power are trying to do everything they possibly can to derail Bitcoin, because they understand that it is the ultimate weapon and they have no way of controlling it. It's the first weapon in, I guess, this 125-year battle when I should say when the banking elite got control of the Fed and got control of Rockefeller Medicine through the Flexner Report, where they're at risk. Their power paradigm is at risk, and they know it. And they will fight tooth and nail. That's why you're seeing them double and triple down on the messenger RNA, even
Mm-hmm.
though the outcomes are so bad. They still don't give a fuck. They actually believe what you asked me before, Jack. Is it because doctors are so dumbed down that they just don't fucking ask the common question anymore? I think they're saying the same thing to you as the public.
Hmm.
Like, you got more people dying from this jab and this manufactured virus than that died in all the wars. You would think that this would be something that patriots and savages would get up and say, what the fuck are we allowing these clowns to do? But guess what? Every day I wake up, I look on Twitter and I see people talking about, who the fucking Titans drafted or who the Dolphins are playing the first week of the season.
Hmm.
What's happening with, Macron's, husband. Shit that doesn't fucking matter. The stuff that matters is what they're doing to your money. What are they doing vaccine passports in Europe? What are they doing with Twitter? Why can't Deepak here, my buddy, who I just turned on to Bitcoin, he can't get his bank connected? In India, he got his first Bitcoin from me. He's probably going to get more today. He's sitting here smiling at me right now. But I told him when I came on the boat that my goal on the boat is to turn 100 people and get wallets and teach them. Why? Because remember, all of them, they're not Americans.
Hmm.
But I keep telling people that America is not linked to our border. It's linked to people who are going to own Bitcoin, and those people are going to reclaim what was taken from us. So I think the army that the second American Revolution is going to be fought with is going to be by a lot of patriots, a lot of savages, and a lot of mercenaries that have orange uniforms, and they don't wear them. It's going to be a very, very interesting future. And that's a future that I'm building. And, I'm not going to be a big player at those times. You will be. But I always think when I talk about this, especially to a young guy like you, I think about my tree that's in El Salvador. Somebody planted that fucking tree in the past, and I get the benefit of it every day.
Hmm.
And I view my role in this the same way as that tree. That I have to do podcasts like this, make this blatantly obvious to guys like you who are painting houses, that this is actually something you need to be fucking pissed off about.
Hmm.
You need to take back so that they don't harm your children in the future with the vaccine schedule, or they don't harm your children with statins, or they don't harm your children with Fruit Loops, whatever it is. But the things that we need to go for, the things that are the most dangerous, not things that are inconsequential in today's world. I view Fruit Loops as inconsequential. I view the jab as very consequential. Why? Because it can kill you fast. And I'm seeing evidence of that on this boat. No one here is dying of acute Fruit Loop toxicity, but there's people dying of turbo cancers on this boat right now.
And if you're someone who's like caught up in a child dying in these psyop shootings, and you don't care about the 7-year-old girl that John Bowden just told me about that died from the vaccine, like you're missing the point.
Right. And, that's why I think it's important for guys like you who people will watch. Say, this guy is painting fucking houses and he fucking cares about that. I'm an executive in an IT company. Why the fuck don't I care about this? Why?
Hmm.
Why am I not talking about this? Why can't I start talking about this with my family at the dinner table? Why can't I take them out for Saturday dinner and let's chat about this? That's what needs to happen around America. If you want to know the truth, that's exactly what happened with the Boston Tea Party.
Hmm.
When people, let me get this straight, the king wants to tell us who to worship for God and wants to charge us 3% tax. People started getting around when they had their scones and their tea and said, fuck this guy. No, we need to start doing the same thing now. Yeah, history doesn't repeat. It rhymes, and right now it's rhyming. The crimes against humanity that our government has performed against we the people is off the fucking chain. I mean, it's so much worse than what happened in 1774, 5, and 6. I just am sitting here stunned. I was like, was the MK Ultra programming and blue light that powerful that young people like you and your little kids, you give two fucks about, the pediatricians being paid to inject these kids 72 times in their first 6 years of life? I mean, I don't know what else it is. I mean, they're not shooting bullets at us. They're using fucking jabs. They're using fake food. They're using fake light. to be the AR-15. And they want to keep focusing in on the school shooters are all fucked up kids to begin with from MK Ultra to give
Hmm.
you a narrative. Well, this is the reason why we need to fucking limit guns. No, we don't need to limit guns because we're going to need them to shoot these motherfuckers. Let's be quite frank here. It's the same story that happened, back in 1776. So pardon me if your kid got killed at Newtown in Connecticut. Yeah, I feel bad about that situation, but I think that was a psyops, and it was a psyops to get our guns. And yeah, I think it sucks that your kid died. Okay. But what did I say before? Blood has to be spilled for freedom.
Hmm.
I got news here. There's going to be a lot more blood spilled until people really wake up. I mean, the last kid that did what they did in Minneapolis, I was on vacation. I just read about it, on Twitter the last couple of days. And I'm going, it's amazing. I think the last 12 school shooters have all been transgendered kids. If that's not an MK Ultra blue light story, you can go listen to the Danny Jones podcast when I talked about it. You don't realize they're using drugs to turn these kids into the wrong gender. Where did this idea start? You want to really take this back? That's exactly what the British did to Alan Turing. They set him up in a tryst, a homosexual tryst, busting him, and guess what his punishment was? We're going to give you female hormones. That's exactly what they're doing to kids today.
Hmm.
And what's the irony? What's the link between that event in 1951, 52 to today? You know how he killed himself? He ate a cyanide-laced apple. And that's how Steve Jobs named Apple. How do you like that? So the legacy of that death, 1951, this is just like the jabs. Why was SV40 and the polio jabs in the 50s and in messenger RNA now? It's almost the same parallel of why Turing was killed and all these transgender school shooters are doing the same thing. Because we are using exogenous things in the environment to change opinions and behaviors to control millions of people. And we need, I should say, they need to take our guns away because they know someday we amass enough Bitcoin, we are going to shoot the technocrats.
Hmm.
That's going to happen. In other words, it's not going to be school shooters. We're going to shoot the real people behind this. And that's what they're trying to prevent. They're doing preventative politics right now by controlling the science. And I think that's the story that people really need to hear. And I know this podcast won't be popular. I know that you'll probably have a lot of trouble keeping this fucker on YouTube.
Hmm.
But hopefully they won't listen to the end of this podcast. The beginning, it's not really devastating. And the end is where the savages need to pay attention. This is where we're headed. You may not like where we're headed. That's fine. You don't have to like it. But Uncle Jack is telling you about the diagnosis. Nobody likes when I tell them you got a glioblastoma in their brain either.
Hmm.
Nobody likes when they get diagnosed with a turbo cancer, but you got to face fucking reality. And we need to do something about this collectively.
And I'd rather be prepared than just, a blind zombie walking around with no
Correct.
clue what's going on. Do you think they're actively like the Apple symbolism? Do you think they're just mocking us? Like what is that?
Yes. Turing was the first Lee Harvey Oswald. You know about the second Lee Harvey Oswald. That's him.
Hmm.
The third one is going to be Elon Musk.
Yep.
Soon as Elon Musk gives them control of the moon and Mars, that's where they'll be able to put their backup stick for the internet. If you want to know what they're worried about, they're worried right now about a coronal mass ejection taking out the Earth, kind of like it took out Mars 4 billion years ago. And they know since everything is electromagnetic, that's what their power is. They have to have a backup system to reboot the system on Earth. That's the real game plan that's going on now. And I know most people don't get that.
Hmm.
All you have to do is go look at the Carrington event and understand when you build a world of electromagnetism and the power grid goes bye-bye, servers go bye-bye, everything goes bye-bye except what's protected underground. Then you begin to understand why you see all these senators, House of Representative people building these massive bunkers underground.
Hmm.
You begin to understand, okay, why are we so interested in a moon that's dead, Mars that's a dead red planet? It's very simple because it's really highly improbable for a celestial CME or a Birkeland current to hit three celestial bodies at once.
Hmm.
So guess what you do?
Spread it
A
out.
backup system in three places. That's what's going on here.
Hmm.
And when you see and make that diagnosis, you begin to realize right now, Elon Musk is a useful idiot for the people in Washington, D.C. That's why they need him. They need him. But as soon as he becomes superfluous, he will be taken out. Mark my words.
What can someone, an average person like me, do to prepare for something like that?
I already told you that answer. You weren't listening. Buy Bitcoin. And I would tell you, same thing. You need to start thinking about putting your most valuable assets under the
Underground.
ground,
Okay.
building, a World War II style place where you can put a backup computer that's never been used before. Every time you update your computer, make sure you have a backup that's under the ground.
Hmm.
Why? Same thing. Have a generator down there. Remember, generators will be shot too. You need to start. I don't want to say being a prepper because you'll still have food. The nice thing about a CME, it photosynthesis comes right back online, but it's anything that's made with a motor, wire, metal, it's fried. Effectively, it's done. It has to be rebuilt. So that means you're not going to have the power grid. You're still going to have gasoline. So that means as long as you have an engine that can go from gas to electricity, then you'll be good. If you have enough money, put yourself a big, huge commercial generator underground and then protect it. Now,
Hmm.
I'm not telling you to set it up. All you need to do is literally put it on the ground. Don't even set it up and leave it there. A lot of people are going to say, well, that's a lot of money to fucking put on the ground, like a casket. But the truth is, it's probably a smart move. And where we're headed now, make sure you have access to water.
Hmm.
Why? Because most water right now uses the power grid to get you water. So if you can make your own well, think about making your own well. If you don't have a pool, go out and buy yourself one of those stupid pools in Walmart, fill it up. Why? Because if it ever happens, at least you'll have a couple of months worth of water in your pool that you can drink. You don't think about this kind of stuff. But also, if you live in a city, start thinking about living more rurally. I don't know where you are now, but I'm looking at the grass over your right shoulder. This is when you're going to have to start thinking about, do you know how to ride a horse? Because you're not going to have a fucking car to drive
Yep.
for a period of time. So do you have a saddle? Yeah, go to a fucking Goodwill and buy an old saddle. Throw it in the fucking thing downstairs. Um, those are the kind of things. Get some books from the library, survival guides from the U.S. military. Get things, how to grow food, how to use seeds. Uh, Learn how to make a vegetable garden, things like that. These are rudimentary things that you'll have enough that you can start how to do it. Most people don't know how to even dress an animal when they kill it.
Can't
Well, you
do
need to
anything.
learn how to fucking do that. You need to make sure that you have some weaponry, that you have some ammunition that you put down underneath in that bunker. If you have books that can teach you skills that you currently don't have, and you have the basic tools, you won't face a dark ages or a black ages like we did after the
Hmm.
Library of Alexandria got burned down, because that's effectively the one risk that both the bankers and the technocrats cannot protect. And they are trying to do that right now. They're stealing money from us right now to get that base on the moon, to get that base on Mars.
Hmm.
That's how important it is. If you really want to know what Space Force is all about, you just got your fucking answer.
As you're saying all this, I can't help but think of Brad Pitt in The Big Short being like,
Yeah.
seeds are going to be the new currency, like
Yep.
it's.
Well, they will in that world, but I'm going to tell you, hopefully you know this is why Jack Dorsey is now figuring out how to use the Bitcoin network over non-internet Wi-Fi networks. Why? Because guess what? You'll be able to come on and trade. You won't even need the internet. In other words, when you want to go out and buy a satchel of apples from another guy's house, you'll be able to do that because you've got Bitcoin, and you can clearly, charge up your phone because you put the generator downstairs, so you can go to the local market and you can make that trade.
Hmm.
Like the one thing I'm gonna tell you about Bitcoin is we're pretty fucking crafty. And when you realize that your time and value really get stored in how you think, this is when you'll begin to understand how Uncle Jack works. Goes back to what I told you about Peter Sutler. It's not survival of the fittest, bro. It's survival of the wisest. I'm giving you a lot of ideas in this
Hmm.
podcast, why I think what I think. And I'm going to tell you, the seed where all that came from was that discussion with Peter Sutler in his biochemistry office over a cup of coffee. This is now the tree that you're sitting under.
Hmm. Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you're enjoying yourself on your
No problem.
cruise. Thank you for all your advice, all your wisdom. I really appreciate what you're doing, for everybody out there who is trying to fight the good fight.
No problem.
Where can people find you on Instagram, X?
Same thing, Dr. Jack Kruse, Kruse. There's a lot of scammers out there. I am only Dr. Jack Kruse. I'm not on TikTok. I am on LinkedIn. I'm on X. I'm on Instagram. I am not on anything else. Well, Facebook, but nothing else.
Hmm.
Like somebody's telling you to come offline and have a private account with me. No, I don't do Telegram. I don't do any of that. I don't do any of that bullshit. The best place to find my science is probably on my website forum because it's all free there. But if you want the new stuff, the cutting edge stuff, that's on Patreon. So you go to patreon.com/ Dr. Jack Kruse again. See, Dr. Jack Kruse is always the key. And that's probably the best place. If you want to learn about probably the first 10, 12 years of the website, just go read my book on Amazon. Why? Because it covers most of the early blogs. You can read that book and get up to speed really quick. And then, obviously, if you're a Patreon member or you're on my website, people can ask me questions there. I don't answer any questions on Instagram. I don't answer
Hmm.
really any questions on X or on Facebook. Why? Because the medical boards are waiting for me to do that so they can come throw me in jail and take my license away. So that's the reason why you have to be behind a paywall. And the Patreon blog is only $5 a month. Why did I pick $5? Because if I'm not worth a cup of coffee, then you told me how you value me already. And that $5 isn't because I need it. It's because I have to protect myself because the medical boards won't pay the $5 to come behind there so they can see how I'm teaching guys like you to become savages.
Awesome. Thank you, Jack. Thank you for your time. I hope you enjoy the rest of your trip.
All right, take care. Bye bye.